An elderly black man walked into an exclusive designer store. His simple clothes and quiet demeanor met with sneers and dismissive glances from the staff. Little did they know, the man they laughed at would soon own the very store they tried to humiliate him in, and change it forever. Subscribe now for more inspiring stories of resilience and transformation. The doors to the elegant designer store swung open, and Mr. Ellis stepped inside. He paused for a moment, taking in the scene around him. Rows of glittering handbags, glass cases displaying fine jewelry, and racks of tailored suits lined the store, exuding an air of exclusivity. His worn shoes made soft echoes against the polished marble floor as he moved slowly, scanning the displays with a gentle curiosity. To the employees, however, he didn't quite fit the image of a typical shopper in this high-end space. He wore simple clothes, a faded shirt, loose trousers, and an old cap that rested on his graying hair. But he walked with a calm grace, his eyes bright and observant. Behind the counter, Greg, the store manager, watched him with a smirk, exchanging a glance with a young sales associate named Laura. Greg leaned in, whispering with a slight sneer, "Look at him, probably lost. I doubt he can afford anything here." Laura chuckled nervously, though she seemed a little uncomfortable, unsure about her manager's attitude but not bold enough to question it. Mr. Ellis continued his slow walk through the store, pausing by a display case filled with designer watches. His gaze lingered on one, a sleek silver piece with a black leather strap. He leaned in closer, his fingers almost reaching the glass, when another sales associate, a tall young man named Peter, approached him. Peter looked him up and down, trying to hide his disdain. "Can I help you with something?" he asked, barely masking his impatience. "Yes," Mr. Ellis replied, his voice calm and polite. "I'd like to see that watch up close, if you don't mind." Peter's mouth twisted in a small, mocking smile as he hesitated, then glanced back at Greg, who shrugged in response. Peter finally unlocked the case, lifting the watch out as though it were made of fragile glass, his eyes darting between Mr. Ellis and the timepiece. "Are you sure this is the watch you're interested in?" Peter's tone was careful but condescending. "It's quite exclusive." Mr. Ellis didn't seem to notice Peter's tone. He studied the watch carefully, turning it gently in his hands, admiring its details. "It's beautiful," he murmured, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. His appreciation seemed genuine, almost childlike. Greg strolled over, crossing his arms as he sized up Mr. Ellis, barely concealing his disdain. "That one's a limited edition," he announced, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "One of our priciest pieces. It's not for everyone, you know." His eyes bore into Mr. Ellis, as if daring him to ask the price. Mr. Ellis met Greg's gaze, still calm, and handed the watch back to Peter. "I see. Thank you for letting me look." He nodded, his tone as respectful as ever, and moved on toward a display of leather briefcases. As he walked away, Greg shook his head, chuckling to himself. "Some people just don't know when they're out of their league," he muttered, loud enough for Laura and Peter to hear. Laura managed a weak smile, while Peter snickered, clearly enjoying the scene. Mr. Ellis reached the briefcases, lightly running his fingers over the fine leather of a sleek black bag, appreciating its quality. Another sales clerk, Sarah, watched him from a distance. Unlike her colleagues, she didn't join in the laughter. There was something about the man's quiet dignity that made her feel uneasy about how he was being treated. She looked away, not wanting to draw attention, but the doubt lingered in her mind. Meanwhile, Greg leaned over to Laura again. "Watch him closely," he said, narrowing his eyes. "These types sometimes have sticky fingers. We don't need any trouble." Laura nodded, though she bit her lip, the discomfort on her face briefly breaking through. Mr. Ellis, seemingly oblivious to the murmurs around him, continued browsing, examining a few more items without haste. He paused by a pair of polished leather shoes, his fingers brushing over the smooth surface as he let out a soft hum of appreciation. After a few more minutes of quiet browsing, Mr. Ellis straightened, glanced around the store, and turned toward the exit. Before he left, He looked back at Greg, giving him a polite nod and a faint smile. "Thank you for your time," he said simply. "I'll be back." There was a hint of something in his voice, a quiet confidence, though Greg missed it entirely, rolling his eyes as Mr. Ellis disappeared through the doors. As soon as he was gone, the store buzzed with whispered laughter and judgmental glances. Greg shook his head, chuckling smugly. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "These people really think they can come in here and play pretend. What a joke." Laura laughed along, but Sarah remained silent, casting a thoughtful glance toward the door where Mr. Ellis had just exited. Outside the store, Mr. Ellis paused on the busy sidewalk, his calm expression unchanged as he looked down at his phone. With a steady hand, he tapped a contact labeled simply as Thomas. The call connected after one ring, and a familiar voice on the other end greeted him warmly. "It's been a while, Mr. Ellis," Thomas said, a touch of curiosity in his tone. "Yes, it has," Mr. Ellis replied, his voice gentle but purposeful. "I think it's time we wrap up that little purchase we discussed. Let's finalize it. I'd like the paperwork to go through as soon as possible." Thomas hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised. "Are you certain you want to move forward with this particular property? There are other options with more potential for growth." "No, Thomas," Mr. Ellis interrupted, his tone firm, though still polite. "This one will do just fine. It's not about the growth potential. This store, it's personal." The silence on the other end spoke volumes, as if Thomas sensed there was more to the story than Mr. Ellis was sharing. But he didn't press further, knowing better than to question the man's judgment. "As you wish, Mr. Ellis. I'll get everything prepared. You should have ownership by the end of the week." "Good," Mr. Ellis said, his voice calm as ever. "And one more thing. I'd like to keep this low-key. No announcements, no celebrations. Just business as usual for now." "Understood," Thomas replied. "I'll handle it discreetly." Mr. Ellis ended the call, slipping his phone back into his pocket. For a moment he stood there in quiet reflection, watching the hustle and bustle of the street around him. His thoughts drifted to the treatment he had just received inside that store, to the mocking glances and careless insults. He took a deep breath, letting the familiar sting of disrespect pass, knowing that soon enough the tables would turn. With a final glance back at the store, he adjusted his cap and walked away, blending seamlessly into the crowd. To any passerby, he was just an ordinary man going about his day. But within him stirred a quiet resolve, a steady determination that had carried him through a lifetime of challenges. He thought back to the many times he had been underestimated, the countless doors that had been closed in his face over the years, simply because he didn't fit the image others expected. And yet, he had built his life and his success on principles of hard work, respect, and resilience. Now, it seemed, life had presented him with a unique opportunity to remind others of those same principles. As he disappeared into the city's flow, a slight smile curved his lips. A few days later, the staff at the designer store went about their day as usual, unaware that a significant change was already in motion. Greg was in his usual spot near the front counter, observing customers with a critical eye, while Laura and Peter arranged displays and chatted idly about their weekend plans. Sarah, the junior employee, glanced around nervously, still unsettled by the recent incident with Mr. Ellis. The memory of his quiet dignity had lingered with her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they'd done something wrong. Just then, the store's doors opened, and in walked Mr. Ellis. This time, he looked distinctly different. Gone was the faded shirt and old cap. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit that fit him perfectly, exuding a quiet elegance. His shoes gleamed as he stepped across the polished floor, and a simple yet luxurious watch glinted on his wrist. Heads turned as he made his way through the store, his calm gaze moving over the employees, his expression unreadable. Greg's face froze, the easygoing smirk vanishing as he recognized Mr. Ellis. For a moment he looked bewildered, as though he couldn't quite reconcile the man he had laughed at with the distinguished figure now approaching him. He quickly regained his composure, pasting on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good afternoon, sir," Greg said, his voice overly polite. "It's, nice to see you again. Is there something specific you're looking for today?" His tone carried an edge of forced courtesy, as if he were trying to mask his confusion. Mr. Ellis looked at him calmly, his gaze unwavering. "Actually, I'm here on business," he replied, his voice firm yet cordial. "I'd like to speak with all the staff. Could you gather everyone, please?" Greg's brow furrowed slightly, caught off guard by the request. "Of course, but may I ask what this is regarding?" Mr. Ellis merely raised an eyebrow, his gaze steady. "All will be explained. Please gather everyone." Reluctantly, Greg nodded and signaled for the employees to come to the front. They exchanged curious looks as they joined him, wondering why this man, whom they'd dismissed so easily before, now commanded such authority. Peter shuffled over with a slight frown, while Laura looked between Greg and Mr. Ellis trying to gauge what was happening. Sarah, sensing something important, stood quietly to the side, her eyes fixed on Mr. Ellis, a hint of understanding dawning on her face. Once everyone was assembled, Mr. Ellis took a moment to look at each of them, his calm gaze sweeping over their faces. He didn't raise his voice, yet the room fell silent, an unspoken respect filling the air. "I'm sure many of you remember me from my last visit," he began, his voice steady. "Some of you were less than welcoming. I was judged, dismissed, and made to feel out of place. This treatment was not only unprofessional but disrespectful." He paused, letting his words sink in. A ripple of discomfort passed through the group as each person recalled their own behavior. Greg's confident smile had faded entirely, replaced by a look of unease. He cleared his throat as if about to interrupt, but Mr. Ellis's gaze held him in place. "What none of you knew," Mr. Ellis continued, "is that I've recently acquired this store. I am now the owner." The announcement struck like a thunderbolt. Greg's face went pale, and a stunned silence filled the room. The silence settled thickly over the room, each employee processing Mr. Ellis's words with a mixture of disbelief and shock. Greg's mouth opened slightly, a nervous laugh escaping as if he thought this might be some elaborate joke. But one look at Mr. Ellis's calm, steady gaze told him that this was far from a jest. Greg's voice finally broke through the silence, strained and stumbling. "Sir, I didn't realize, we had no idea that—" He trailed off, unable to find the right words to cover his initial disbelief and now rapidly growing fear. Mr. Ellis didn't respond immediately. He let the weight of the moment hang, his gaze still focused, moving from face to face. The employees shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting toward each other, searching for some reassurance that wasn't there. In that silence, each person seemed to be reliving the last encounter, the dismissive glances, the judgmental remarks, the quiet laughter. And now, each of those moments felt like a mistake they wished they could take back. Finally, Mr. Ellis took a slow breath, his expression softening slightly as he addressed them. "It's not that I need anyone's pity or special treatment," he said, his tone gentle but unyielding. "But I expect, and frankly, every person who steps through these doors deserves a basic level of respect. That's not just a courtesy. It's the very foundation of good business." He shifted his gaze to Greg, who seemed to shrink under the intensity of Mr. Ellis's stare. "I recall you, in particular, being quite quick to judge me," he said, his voice measured. "You assumed, without any hesitation, that my appearance was all you needed to know about me. You didn't take the time to consider who I was, and you treated me like I was somehow beneath you." Greg swallowed hard, his face paling further as he struggled to meet Mr. Ellis's gaze. "You're right, sir," Greg stammered, attempting to salvage his professionalism. I regret any misunderstanding. If I had known who you were—" Mr. Ellis held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Exactly. If you had known. But that's the problem, isn't it? Respect shouldn't depend on someone's outward appearance or social status. True respect means treating everyone, regardless of how they look, with the same kindness and dignity. And that's the kind of business I want to build here." His gaze swept across the other employees, some of whom looked down, unable to meet his eyes. He paused, his expression growing even more serious. So, from today onward, things are going to change. Drastically. He glanced toward Greg once more, letting his words hang heavily. I have to make decisions based on what I believe is best for this establishment, and a change in leadership is where it will start. Greg's face fell, his mouth working soundlessly as he processed what Mr. Ellis was saying. Panic flashed in his eyes as he opened his mouth to protest. Mr. Ellis, please. Surely there's a way to work this out. I've been with this store for years. Mr. Ellis gave him a look that was both understanding and unyielding. I'm not dismissing you out of anger, Greg. I'm making this decision out of necessity. The store needs a culture rooted in respect and inclusivity, and that begins with the example set by leadership. I wish you well, but I think it's time you moved on. Greg's shoulders slumped, his face now a mixture of frustration, shame, and helplessness. Without another word, he nodded, his once proud demeanor reduced to resignation. He knew there was nothing left to argue. He simply turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps heavy, each step a reminder of the respect he had denied others, now stripped from him in turn. After Greg left, Mr. Ellis turned to the remaining staff, his expression softening, but his message still clear. The rest of you, I want you to understand that I'm here not just as an owner, but as someone who values every single person in this store. From the highest-paying customer to the person who simply wants to browse and see what we offer. Everyone deserves kindness and a fair experience. His gaze lingered on Peter, who had taken part in mocking him that day. Peter shifted uncomfortably, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. Mr. Ellis nodded, reading the young man's discomfort. Peter, I don't plan on dismissing everyone, he said slowly, watching Peter's shoulders relax a fraction. But I need to know that you're willing to change, that you're willing to work in an environment that respects people first. Peter nodded quickly, his face flushed. Yes, sir. I understand, and I'm sorry for my behavior. I was wrong, and I know that now. Mr. Ellis accepted his words with a slight nod, then turned to Laura, who seemed torn between relief and guilt. And Laura, he said, I know that sometimes it's easy to follow others, to join in with the crowd. But in my store, I expect people to stand for what's right, not just what's easy. Are you prepared to do that? Laura swallowed, nodding earnestly. Yes, Mr. Ellis, I understand. I won't let you down. Lastly, Mr. Ellis looked at Sarah, who had been silent throughout, but whose face held a look of understanding and quiet respect. Sarah, he said, his tone softening, I noticed that you hesitated. I could see that part of you felt uncomfortable with what happened. I hope, moving forward, that you'll continue to trust that instinct. That's the quality this store needs, the courage to stand up for others, even when no one else will. Sarah nodded, relief visible on her face. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. I promise, I'll do my best to uphold those values. With a final glance at each of them, Mr. Ellis gave a slight smile, filled with both warmth and determination. We'll rebuild this place together, he said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. And we'll make it into a store that anyone would feel welcome to enter, starting now. As he finished speaking, the employees seemed to breathe out, the weight of the lesson they'd learned settling on their shoulders. Mr. Ellis's presence filled the room, his calm authority now unmistakable, and a sense of renewal lingered in the air as he began to set the tone for the store's future. The next few days at the store felt like an entirely different world for the remaining employees. Mr. Ellis's influence was quiet but unmistakable. He spent each day observing, guiding, and setting a new standard, showing by example what he expected. Every interaction with customers was an opportunity for the team to redeem themselves, to live up to the values Mr. Ellis had outlined. He watched closely, sometimes stepping in to speak with customers himself, always treating them with warmth and genuine interest, no matter how they were dressed or what they looked like. Peter, who had once scoffed at customers he deemed out of place, found himself working to undo old habits. He observed Mr. Ellis's approach, seeing how he engaged with every customer, as though they were the most important person in the room. Each time Peter caught himself reverting to his old judgmental glances or dismissive tone, he would stop, take a breath, and refocus, remembering Mr. Ellis's words. Bit by bit, Peter was starting to change, and with each respectful interaction, he felt a small sense of pride that he hadn't felt before. Laura, too, began to transform. She had always followed the lead of people like Greg, too afraid to speak up or question behavior she knew was wrong. But now, with Greg gone and Mr. Ellis at the helm, she felt empowered to be kinder, more attentive, and more authentic. She noticed herself smiling more, not just because she felt obligated, but because treating people well actually made her feel better. She caught herself laughing genuinely with customers, finding small ways to make their day a little brighter. For the first time, Laura felt as though she was contributing to something meaningful, and that made her want to come to work every day. But it was Sarah who perhaps felt the strongest sense of validation. She had always had a quiet empathy for others, a sensitivity to how people were treated, but in the old environment, her empathy had often been met with scorn. Now, under Mr. Ellis's leadership, she felt as though her natural compassion was a gift, a strength rather than a weakness. Mr. Ellis noticed her ability to read customers' moods, her gentle way of offering help without being overbearing. She became someone he relied on, often trusting her to handle delicate situations with a warmth that others couldn't easily replicate. Sarah took pride in her role, finally feeling that her approach was respected and encouraged. On the fourth day after Mr. Ellis took ownership, he called the staff into a small meeting before the store opened. He had arranged chairs in a circle in the middle of the showroom, creating a casual and open atmosphere. Each person took a seat, their curiosity piqued by the unexpected gathering. Mr. Ellis looked around the circle, his calm gaze meeting each of theirs in turn. "I wanted to thank each of you," he began, his voice warm but direct. "These past few days have shown me a lot, and I can see the efforts you're making to change and grow. I know it hasn't been easy, and I respect that each of you has taken this seriously." He paused, giving them a chance to absorb his words. "But there's something else I want you all to think about," he continued. "Respect isn't just something we give to customers, it's something we need to give each other as well. We're a team, and for this store to truly succeed, we need to support one another, to encourage growth not only in ourselves but in those around us." Peter nodded slowly, a look of realization dawning on his face. He'd been so focused on changing his own behavior toward customers that he hadn't considered the importance of respect within the team. Laura looked thoughtful, remembering times she had been too quick to judge her co-workers or too eager to please managers like Greg, even at the expense of her colleagues' comfort. "From now on," Mr. Ellis continued, "I want each of you to feel comfortable bringing up concerns, sharing ideas, and supporting one another. If you see something that doesn't align with the values we're building here, I want you to feel empowered to speak up. And remember, each of you brings something unique to this store. Don't be afraid to share it." He looked directly at Sarah, a subtle smile on his face. "Sarah, I'd like you to help mentor Laura and Peter in understanding the importance of empathy in customer interactions. You have a natural ability to make people feel comfortable, and that's a quality we all can learn from." Sarah's cheeks flushed with surprise and pride, and she nodded, the weight of his trust filling her with newfound confidence. Laura and Peter exchanged glances, recognizing that they each had something to learn from her, and their nods carried genuine respect. "Thank you, Mr. Ellis," Laura said, her voice sincere. "I never really thought about my work like this before. I've been following along, I guess. It feels good to do something that actually matters." Peter chimed in, his tone a little humbled. "Same here. I mean, I used to think I knew everything about this job. Now I see how much I was missing. I'll do my best to learn from Sarah and from you, Mr. Ellis." Mr. Ellis smiled, pleased to see the change blossoming in each of them. Good, he said, his voice gentle. This isn't about being perfect. It's about growing together. And as long as you keep trying, that's all I'll ever ask of you. The group sat in silence for a moment, each person absorbing the gravity of what Mr. Ellis had just shared. In that quiet space, they realized they weren't just employees anymore. They were part of a team with a shared vision, a purpose greater than making sales or looking the part. They were here to create a place where everyone, customers and staff alike, felt valued. After a pause, Mr. Ellis stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "All right, let's open those doors," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Let's show the world what we're about." As the team stood and prepared to welcome customers, each one felt a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment not only to the store but to each other. And in that moment, they understood that they were no longer just salespeople in a designer store. They were the heartbeat of something far greater, and it was only just beginning. As the days passed, word spread quietly but steadily throughout the community about the transformation happening inside the designer store. Customers who had once felt intimidated by its upscale aura found themselves returning, drawn in by the newfound warmth and openness. Regulars noticed the difference immediately. The staff seemed genuinely interested in their experience, and there was a welcoming energy that hadn't been there before. It wasn't long before the store became known as a place where everyone, regardless of appearance or background, was treated with respect. Mr. Ellis observed these changes with a quiet satisfaction. He often walked the floor himself, engaging with customers and employees alike, encouraging everyone with his calm presence. He never raised his voice, never forced his authority. Instead, he led by example, gently steering his team toward the values he had emphasized. His patience with customers, whether they were buying something small or simply browsing, set the tone, and his humility showed the staff that kindness was a strength, not a weakness. One afternoon, a particular customer entered the store. A young man in his 20s, dressed in a hoodie and jeans with a hesitant expression as he looked around. Peter, who was rearranging a display nearby, noticed him and felt an old habit flicker at the edge of his mind. In the past, he would have quickly assessed the young man as not a serious customer, probably someone just wasting time. But Peter caught himself, remembering Mr. Ellis's words and how easily they could have misjudged him that first day. He took a deep breath and approached the young man with a friendly smile. "Welcome in," Peter said, his tone open and genuine. "Is there anything you'd like to see? We've got some new pieces in, or if you're just browsing, feel free to take your time." The young man looked relieved, as though he hadn't expected such a warm reception. "Thanks," he said, glancing around nervously. I'm actually looking for a gift. It's my mom's birthday, and I wanted to get her something special, but I don't really know much about, well, fancy stuff like this." Peter's smile deepened. "No problem at all. We'll find something she'll love." He led the young man toward a section with more affordable, classic pieces, explaining the options with patience and care. They looked over various items together, Peter's encouragement making the customer feel at ease. Meanwhile, Mr. Ellis watched from across the room, a hint of pride in his gaze. He could see the transformation in Peter, no longer the dismissive salesperson he once was, but a young man learning to see each person as an individual. The moment felt like a small victory, a testament to the values they were building together. As Peter continued assisting the young man, Laura and Sarah were handling their own customers with equal attentiveness. Laura, who had always been reserved and cautious, was laughing softly with an older woman trying on a scarf. She offered suggestions with a kindness that felt genuine, enjoying the process of helping the woman find something that brought her joy. Laura's confidence had grown visibly, and Mr. Ellis saw in her a newfound purpose that went beyond simply making sales. Sarah, too, had become a fixture in the store, her empathetic nature drawing customers who appreciated her gentle, attentive approach. She was helping a father and his young daughter, carefully showing the little girl some bracelets while the father looked on with a smile. The young girl giggled as Sarah slipped a bracelet over her tiny wrist, her eyes lighting up with wonder, Sarah's ability to connect with people, even the youngest customers, made her a valuable part of the team, and Mr. Ellis recognized that her kindness set a powerful example for everyone. As the day wore on and the store bustled with activity, Mr. Ellis decided it was time to take a step back, to let his team fully embrace their new roles. He quietly slipped into his office, reflecting on how far they had come in such a short time. The change he had envisioned was now a reality, each staff member contributing in their own way to a culture of respect and inclusivity. Later that evening, as the store prepared to close, Mr. Ellis gathered the team for a final meeting. The employees assembled in the back room, tired but satisfied after a successful day. There was a new energy among them, a shared pride that hadn't existed before. Mr. Ellis took a moment to look around at each of them, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey they had taken together. "I want to thank each of you for your hard work and your openness to change," he began, his voice filled with quiet sincerity. "You've shown that respect isn't just a word, it's a way of being. And it's that respect, that kindness that will keep people coming back here, not just for the products we sell, but for the experience they have with each of you." He paused, letting his words sink in, and then continued. "I know that each of you has gone through your own journey these past few weeks, and I'm proud of the progress you've made. Remember, this isn't the end. There will always be more to learn, more ways to grow, but today I can say with confidence that we're on the right path." Peter, feeling a surge of newfound confidence, spoke up. "Mr. Ellis, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I know I didn't start out in the best way, but you gave me a chance to change, and I'm grateful for that." Laura nodded in agreement, her voice steady. "Same here. I never realized how much of a difference we could make, just by how we treat people. It's something I'll carry with me, not just here, but everywhere." Sarah, always quiet but thoughtful, added softly, "It's nice to be part of something that feels meaningful. It's more than just a job now." "Thank you, Mr. Ellis." Mr. Ellis smiled, a warmth spreading across his face. "Thank you all. It's each of you who made this possible." He looked around one last time, knowing that this moment marked a new chapter for them all. They weren't just co-workers now. They were a team, a family united by values that transcended any one person. With a final nod, Mr. Ellis dismissed them, letting them head home with a sense of accomplishment and fulfillment. As the store fell quiet, he stood alone for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here, and the legacy he hoped to leave behind. Finally, he locked the doors, his heart full of pride, knowing that this store, his store, had become exactly what he'd envisioned, a place where respect, kindness, and genuine human connection were woven into its very foundation. A few months passed, and the transformation of the store continued to deepen. Under Mr. Ellis's leadership, the staff became known for their kindness, professionalism, and attention to each customer's unique needs. The changes resonated not only within the store, but began to ripple outward, drawing in a diverse clientele from all walks of life. People came not just for the high-quality products, but for the rare warmth they felt the moment they stepped inside. The store, once seen as intimidating and exclusive, now felt like a welcoming space where anyone could feel valued. One day, Mr. Ellis received a letter at the store, addressed personally to him. It was neatly folded and handwritten, the ink slightly smudged, as if the writer had been unsure of their words. As Mr. Ellis unfolded the letter and began to read, his eyes softened. The letter was from Greg, the former store manager. The tone was humble, apologetic, and filled with reflection. Greg wrote that his dismissal had been a wake-up call, one that had forced him to confront his own biases and behavior. Losing his position had been difficult, but it had also given him time to consider the kind of person he wanted to be. Greg acknowledged that he'd judged people based on appearances and that he'd treated Mr. Ellis, and countless others, with an unfair, dismissive attitude. "I'm not writing this to ask for my job back," Greg wrote. "I know I lost that chance and I don't deserve it. I'm writing because I want you to know that I'm working to change, to become a better person. You gave me a lesson that I didn't understand at first, but now I see what you meant. Respect is more than just a word. It's a way of treating people, of living. I'm trying to live by that now. I'm sorry, Mr. Ellis. Thank you for showing me what real dignity looks like." Mr. Ellis held the letter in his hands for a moment, letting the words settle in. There was a part of him that felt a deep satisfaction, not from Greg's apology, but from the knowledge that his actions had made a difference, however small, in someone else's life. He had always believed that people were capable of change, of growth, if they were given the right encouragement and guidance. This letter was proof of that belief. Later that day, he shared the letter with his current staff during a quiet moment, not as a way to boast, but as a lesson for everyone. "We don't always see the impact we have on people," he said, folding the letter carefully. "Sometimes it takes time for lessons to sink in, but if we stay true to our values and treat people with respect, we plant seeds that can grow in ways we might never expect." The team listened, the words striking a chord with each of them. They had all come to understand that the changes they'd made in themselves were not just for the store or for Mr. Ellis. They were for their own lives. His mentorship had become a guiding force that extended beyond the workplace, influencing how they treated others in every aspect of their lives. Over time, each member of the team found themselves growing in unexpected ways. Peter developed a reputation for his patience and empathy, skills he once thought were unimportant, but now understood as strengths. Laura discovered a newfound sense of confidence, often taking the initiative to suggest changes or improvements, her voice no longer timid or uncertain. Sarah, once the quiet observer, became the emotional heart of the team, trusted by customers and colleagues alike for her unwavering kindness. One morning, as the store opened, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was the young man who had come months before, looking for a birthday gift for his mother. This time he was dressed in a crisp shirt, standing a little taller, with a confident smile. He approached Peter, who recognized him immediately and greeted him warmly. "Back again?" Peter asked, extending a hand. "It's good to see you." The young man shook Peter's hand, his smile broadening. "I had to come back. My mom loved that gift, by the way. She still talks about how nice you all were to me." He looked around, taking in the store's familiar, welcoming atmosphere. "I actually wanted to talk to Mr. Ellis, if he's here." Peter nodded, guiding him toward Mr. Ellis's office. The young man took a deep breath before stepping inside, and Mr. Ellis looked up from his desk, a warm smile spreading across his face as he recognized him. "Welcome back," Mr. Ellis said, standing up to shake his hand. "What brings you here today?" The young man looked down for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "Mr. Ellis, I just wanted to thank you. Coming here that day, it really changed something in me. I was at a low point, feeling like I didn't belong anywhere. The way you and your team treated me, like I was someone worth their time, it meant more than I can say." Mr. Ellis nodded, listening quietly. The young man continued, "I took that feeling with me. It gave me the courage to go after a job I didn't think I'd get. And I got it. I've been working there for a few months now, and every day I remember what I felt here. I try to treat people the way you treated me." Mr. Ellis's eyes shone with a quiet pride. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "Respect, kindness, they have a way of coming back to us. I'm sure you're making a difference where you are." The young man nodded, clearly moved. He handed Mr. Ellis a small package, a gesture of his gratitude. "I know it's not much, but I just wanted you to have something in return, a reminder of how much this place has done for me." Mr. Ellis accepted the gift with a humble smile, grateful not for the object itself, but for what it represented. As the young man left, he looked back one last time, giving Mr. Ellis and the store a final nod, as though to carry their spirit with him into the world. When he was gone, Mr. Ellis placed the small package on his desk, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. This store, once filled with judgment and exclusivity, had become a place of hope, a place where people found a piece of themselves, and Mr. Ellis knew that his work here had only just begun. As the store continued to flourish under Mr. Ellis's guidance, his reputation as a man of integrity and kindness grew beyond the walls of his establishment. More and more people in the community began to recognize the store as a symbol of something greater, a place where respect, humility, and genuine care were at the heart of every interaction. Local newspapers picked up the story, captivated by the transformation and the man behind it. Articles began to circulate about the store with a heart and the mysterious owner who had reshaped it not through flashy advertisements or promotions, but through quiet, unshakable principles. One particular morning, as Mr. Ellis was going over some inventory records in his office, he received a visitor he hadn't expected. A woman in her late 40s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, was escorted into his office by Sarah. She introduced herself as Evelyn Carter, a regional director from the parent company that managed the store franchise. Her demeanor was professional, but there was a warmth in her eyes that suggested she was not here for a typical inspection. "Mr. Ellis," she began, extending her hand with a smile, "I've heard quite a lot about you recently. I wanted to come down and see this place for myself." Mr. Ellis rose and shook her hand firmly, his expression curious but welcoming. "Ms. Carter, it's a pleasure. I didn't realize we were on anyone's radar outside the local community," he replied with a modest chuckle. Evelyn took a seat, looking around the office with an appreciative eye. "I can assure you, Mr. Ellis, you're on more than a few radars. The story of how you transformed this store has made its way up through the company. I must say, we're all quite impressed with what you've done here." She paused as if weighing her next words carefully. "To be honest, I expected a few rough edges. Change can be messy. But from what I've seen so far, it's remarkable. The environment, the staff's morale, the customer experience. It's all as close to perfect as I've ever seen." Mr. Ellis's smile softened, humbled by her words. "Thank you, Ms. Carter. I can't take all the credit. The team here has grown so much. They've really embraced what we're building together." Evelyn nodded, clearly pleased. "That's actually part of why I'm here. I wanted to discuss some opportunities with you, Mr. Ellis." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze intent. "The parent company is looking to implement programs that focus on customer experience, community engagement, and inclusivity. What you've accomplished here aligns perfectly with our vision for the future of our brand. We would like to expand this approach to other locations and bring you on as an advisor." Mr. Ellis blinked, taken aback. He hadn't expected this kind of recognition, let alone an opportunity to influence other stores. He paused, considering the weight of her offer. "That's quite an honor, Ms. Carter," he said slowly. "But I have to admit my heart is here. This store is more than just a business to me. It's a part of my life, my values." Evelyn gave him an understanding nod. "I respect that, Mr. Ellis. And we're not asking you to leave this place. In fact, we want you to stay here, but with added responsibilities. You would oversee training programs, consult with other managers, and help guide the transformation of stores across the region. You'd be doing what you're already doing, just on a larger scale." Mr. Ellis considered her words, the possibilities unfolding before him. The idea of sharing the values he'd built here, of helping other stores embrace a similar spirit, felt deeply meaningful. But he hesitated, aware of the time and energy it would require. His dedication to his own store was unwavering, and he wondered how he would manage both. Seeing his contemplation, Evelyn added, "You'll have the support you need, of course. We can arrange for additional staff to assist you here, and we're prepared to compensate you generously for the advisory role." Mr. Ellis nodded slowly, sensing the potential in this opportunity. This was a chance to take what they had achieved in this small corner of the world and bring it to a broader audience, to help others experience the same transformation he had witnessed in his team and his customers. And if it meant that stores across the region could become places of kindness and respect, just like his own, perhaps it was worth considering. "I'll need some time to think it over," he said finally, looking up at Evelyn with a thoughtful expression. "This store is my first priority, and I want to make sure that any changes here continue to reflect our core values. but I am open to the idea, if it can be done in a way that doesn't compromise what we've built." Evelyn smiled, clearly pleased with his response. "Take all the time you need, Mr. Ellis. I'll be in touch and we can discuss the details when you're ready. But know that we're genuinely excited about the possibility of working with you. What you've done here is rare, and it's exactly the direction we want to move in." With that, she rose, extending her hand again. "Thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure seeing this place and meeting the person behind it all." Mr. Ellis shook her hand, feeling a sense of accomplishment, but also a quiet resolve. As Evelyn left, he sat back in his chair, reflecting on how far they had come, from a store mired in judgment and exclusivity to a beacon of respect and kindness in the community. And now, that message had resonated so strongly that it was reaching people he'd never met, in places he'd never been. The idea of bringing these values to other stores filled him with a quiet excitement. It was a daunting challenge, but he saw it as an extension of his mission, a way to spread the principles of respect, humility, and genuine care even further. In his heart, he knew this was only the beginning of what he could accomplish. As he sat in his office, a feeling of gratitude washed over him. He thought of each member of his team, how they had embraced the changes, how they had grown not just as employees but as people. They had taken his vision and made it their own, and now, together, they had a chance to create something truly lasting. Mr. Ellis smiled to himself, knowing that his journey wasn't over. The next chapter awaited, filled with new challenges and the promise of spreading the values he held dear. And he was ready to take that next step, confident that with his team beside him, there was no limit to what they could achieve. In the following weeks, Mr. Ellis took time to consider the opportunity Evelyn had offered. He wanted to ensure that his store remained strong and that his team was prepared to carry forward the values they had built together, even if his focus would eventually be split. He held individual meetings with each staff member, talking to them not just as their boss, but as a mentor, reinforcing the lessons they'd embraced over the past months. One afternoon, he gathered the entire team in the back room for a special meeting. They could sense there was something different in his demeanor, an excitement tempered with purpose. When they were all seated, he stood in front of them, his gaze warm and full of pride. "I wanted to share some news with you," he began, looking around the room at each familiar face. "We've accomplished something here that's caught the attention of people beyond this community. The values we've built together, the way we treat each other and our customers, it's made an impact, and the parent company has taken notice." A murmur went through the group, a mix of surprise and curiosity. Sarah, always the most thoughtful of the group, tilted her head, sensing that there was more to come. Mr. Ellis continued, "I've been offered an opportunity to help bring the values we live by here to other stores in the region. They want me to advise on how to create environments like ours in other places, so people everywhere can experience what we've built together. But I want you all to know that this store remains my priority, and I won't be going anywhere. This place, this team, is my foundation. None of this would even be possible without each one of you." Peter grinned, feeling a surge of pride. "Mr. Ellis, that's amazing. They couldn't have chosen a better person for the job. You've changed all of us. Of course, other stores would want the same thing." Laura chimed in, her eyes bright with excitement. "Yeah, I think it's wonderful. Imagine how many people could benefit from a workplace like this, where everyone feels valued." Mr. Ellis nodded, deeply touched by their enthusiasm. "Thank you, all of you. But with this opportunity comes a new responsibility for each of you as well. While I may spend some time working with other stores, I'll need you all to step up and help lead here. This store is a reflection of our collective effort, and I want each of you to feel empowered to take ownership of our values and our mission." He paused, letting his words settle over them, then added, "Peter, I see leadership potential in you. I want you to help set an example for the team, to support everyone as they continue to grow. You have a way with people when you take the time to listen and understand them. I'd like you to start thinking of yourself as someone the team can look to for guidance." Peter's eyes widened, both surprised and honored. He nodded, trying to mask his nervousness but feeling a deep sense of pride. "I won't let you down, Mr. Ellis. Thank you for trusting me." Turning to Laura, Mr. Ellis smiled warmly. "Laura, I've watched you blossom here. Your confidence has grown so much, and I want you to take that confidence and run with it. Don't hold back. I'd like you to oversee customer experience, helping new team members understand how we treat people, and ensuring every customer feels valued from the moment they step in." Laura's face lit up, her heart swelling with appreciation. "I'd be honored to, Mr. Ellis. Thank you for seeing that in me." Finally, he looked at Sarah. "Sarah, you have a unique gift for empathy. People feel comfortable around you, and they open up to you because they sense your genuine kindness. I want you to keep being that anchor, both for the team and for our customers. Your heart is what gives this place its warmth, and I trust you to carry that forward." Sarah's eyes glistened with emotion, and she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Thank you, Mr. Ellis. I'll do my best," she whispered. Mr. Ellis let the moment linger, pride radiating from him as he looked around the room. "This store is in your hands, and I have no doubt that each of you will continue to make it a place where everyone feels respected, appreciated, and seen." The team dispersed with a renewed sense of purpose. Each person felt a personal responsibility for the store's mission, knowing that Mr. Ellis had entrusted them with more than just their roles. He had entrusted them with his vision. Over the next few weeks, Mr. Ellis began consulting with other stores, sharing his methods, and guiding new managers on how to instill respect and kindness in their teams. The work was challenging but fulfilling, and as he traveled, he remained in close contact with his team, hearing updates from Peter, Laura, and Sarah about how things were running smoothly in his absence. One evening, after a long day of training managers at a different store, Mr. Ellis received a message from Peter. It was a photo of the team gathered in front of the store, each of them holding a handwritten note that spelled out, "Thank you, Mr. Ellis." Below the photo was a message, "We're keeping the light you lit here burning. You'll always have a family in us." Mr. Ellis looked at the photo for a long moment, a sense of deep gratitude filling him. He knew then that his journey, as well as the journey of his team, had only just begun. Several months passed, and the transformation that began with Mr. Ellis's store had spread throughout the region. Stores once known for their rigid, transactional atmosphere were now places where customers felt at home, where employees were motivated to bring genuine care and respect into every interaction. Mr. Ellis's quiet guidance had inspired a ripple effect, creating spaces where kindness, inclusivity, and integrity were at the core of every business. Meanwhile, back at his own store, Peter, Laura, and Sarah had taken their new roles to heart. Under their shared leadership, the team had grown stronger and more unified. They celebrated each other's successes, shared responsibilities, and continually upheld the principles that Mr. Ellis had instilled in them. The store was flourishing, and every customer who walked in felt the difference. One day, Mr. Ellis returned to the store after a week of travel. As he stepped through the familiar doors, he was greeted with warm smiles from his team. Peter came over first, shaking his hand with enthusiasm. "Welcome back, Mr. Ellis. You wouldn't believe how well things have been going here. It feels like every day we're getting closer to the vision you created." Laura joined them, her eyes shining with excitement. "We've had so many repeat customers come in lately, just because they feel welcome here. It's been amazing to see people recognize the change and want to be a part of it." Sarah added softly, "It's not just the customers either. I feel like we've built something really special among us as a team. This place, it feels like a family." Mr. Ellis took in their words, a deep sense of fulfillment settling over him. "You've all done something remarkable here. I may have planted the seeds, but each of you has nurtured this place and made it your own. I couldn't be prouder." As they caught up, a familiar face entered the store, the young man who had visited months before, looking for a gift for his mother. Now he walked in with his mother by his side, an older woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He waved to Mr. Ellis and his team, clearly excited to introduce her to the place he had spoken of so often. Mr. Ellis smiled, approaching the young man and his mother. "Welcome back," he said warmly. "It's good to see you again." The young man introduced his mother, explaining that he had brought her here because he wanted her to see the store that had impacted him so deeply. "This place changed my life," he said, glancing at Mr. Ellis and the team with gratitude. "I wanted my mom to see where it all started." The mother looked at Mr. Ellis with admiration. "Thank you for treating my son with such kindness," she said softly. "He's spoken so highly of this place. It's rare to find a business with this kind of warmth." Mr. Ellis nodded humbly. "Thank you. It's been our pleasure to create a place where everyone feels valued, and seeing people like your son return, knowing he's taken some of those values with him, that's what makes this all worthwhile." The young man's mother browsed the store, guided by Sarah, who shared stories of the different items with her usual warmth and attentiveness. Meanwhile, Mr. Ellis and the young man exchanged a few more words, each understanding the impact of kindness in ways that went beyond words. As the day continued, Mr. Ellis took moments to observe his team in action. Peter helping a couple find the perfect anniversary gift, Laura offering thoughtful suggestions to a nervous young woman shopping for her first interview outfit, Sarah assisting a group of friends choosing gifts for each other. Each interaction was filled with genuine care, patience, and respect, the very qualities he had once envisioned for this store. Now they were fully realized, not because of any single person, but because of the shared commitment of a team who believed in something greater. When the day wound down and the last customer had left, Mr. Ellis gathered his team one more time. He looked at each of them, his heart full, knowing that they had not only transformed this store but also themselves. "I want each of you to remember," he began, his voice filled with quiet emotion, "that what you've built here is more than just a job, more than just a business. This place reflects the best parts of who you are. Your kindness, your integrity, your dedication. You have created something that will last, something that will touch lives in ways you may never fully realize." Peter, always one for humor to lighten the mood, grinned. "Well, Mr. Ellis, if you're trying to make us cry, you're doing a pretty good job." They all laughed, and Mr. Ellis chuckled, feeling the warmth and camaraderie in the room. "Maybe a little," he admitted with a smile. "But seriously, I want you all to know that you've given this store its soul. And as long as you keep treating people with respect, you'll always have a place here, a family here." After a moment of shared silence, he continued, "As for me, I'll still be here, guiding and supporting however I can. But from this point forward, I consider this store just as much yours as it is mine. Each of you has earned that, so thank you for your hard work, your dedication, and most importantly, your hearts." The team stood there, absorbing the weight of his words, each person feeling a sense of pride and ownership in a way they hadn't before. They knew that this was no longer just a workplace. It was a legacy, one they were all part of, and one they would continue to nurture and grow together. Mr. Ellis's journey was far from over, but he knew that no matter where life took him, this store, and the people within it, would remain a testament to the values he held dear. It was more than a business. It was a home, a beacon of kindness, and a reminder of what true respect and integrity could build. As they locked up for the night, each person left with a feeling of contentment and a renewed commitment to carry forward the spirit of the store. And Mr. Ellis, watching his team disappear into the evening, felt a quiet, enduring pride, knowing that he had not only built a business, but had shaped lives, leaving a legacy that would thrive far beyond his own presence. As the months passed, Mr. Ellis's store continued to thrive, and its impact began to extend beyond even the regional stores he was advising. Stories of the store's culture, rooted in respect and integrity, began to circulate online, shared by customers who had experienced its unique atmosphere. Bloggers, local influencers, and community leaders spoke about the store as a model of genuine customer service and ethical leadership. It wasn't long before news reached the broader business community, and soon, Mr. Ellis received invitations to speak at events, sharing his insights on the transformative power of respect and kindness in business. Initially hesitant, Mr. Ellis felt out of his element. He had never sought the spotlight and was far more comfortable working quietly behind the scenes. But the encouragement from his team, particularly from Sarah, who reminded him of how much his story could inspire others, helped him see that this was an opportunity to spread the values he held so dear on a larger scale. With that in mind, he agreed to his first speaking engagement, a local business seminar where he would share his journey and the principles that had reshaped his store. The evening of the seminar arrived, and Mr. Ellis stood backstage, feeling a familiar mix of nerves and determination. Peter, Laura, and Sarah had insisted on accompanying him for support, sitting in the front row to cheer him on. As he stepped onto the stage, he was met with a warm round of applause, and seeing the faces of his team among the audience gave him the courage to begin. In his quiet, steady voice, Mr. Ellis recounted the story of his first visit to the store and the disrespect he had encountered. He spoke about his decision to purchase the store, not out of revenge, but with a vision of creating a place where every person was valued, regardless of appearance or background. He shared stories of his team, how they had embraced change, grown together, and created an environment that was both welcoming and transformative. His words were simple yet powerful, filled with genuine emotion as he explained that the true heart of any business lies in the people who run it and the values they choose to uphold. As he finished speaking, the audience gave him a standing ovation. People approached him afterward, eager to thank him for his message and to ask questions about how they could implement similar values in their own businesses. For Mr. Ellis, this was both humbling and deeply fulfilling. He realized that his journey, once centered on a single store, had now become a source of inspiration for countless others. In that moment, he saw that the impact of kindness and respect could reach far beyond the walls of his own establishment. Returning to the store after the seminar, Mr. Ellis found a renewed sense of purpose, not only for his own business but for the influence he could continue to have on a larger scale. His team sensed this change in him, and they too felt invigorated by the idea that their work was part of something much bigger than they had ever imagined. They were no longer just employees of a single store. They were part of a movement, an example of how businesses everywhere could operate with respect, integrity, and a commitment to genuine human connection. One evening, as the team was closing up, Mr. Ellis gathered them together for an announcement. "I've been thinking about how we can take what we've built here and share it with even more people," he began, his eyes shining with quiet excitement. "I want to start a mentorship program here in our community for young people who are just entering the workforce. I want to teach them the values that have shaped this store, to give them the skills and confidence to carry those values with them wherever they go." The team responded with immediate enthusiasm. Sarah's face lit up, clearly touched by the idea. "Mr. Ellis, that's a beautiful idea. There are so many young people who don't get a chance to learn about kindness and respect in a work environment. This would mean so much to them, and to us," Peter added, grinning. "And who better to teach them than you? They'll be lucky to have a mentor like you." Mr. Ellis chuckled, humbled by their words. "Thank you, but I can't do this alone. I'll need each of you to help guide them, to share what you've learned and help them see the value in these principles. We'll be teaching them how to work, yes, but more importantly, we'll be teaching them how to treat others and themselves with respect and dignity." Laura nodded, already envisioning the impact they could have. "I'm all in. I think this could change lives just like you changed ours." With the team's full support, Mr. Ellis began to lay the groundwork for the mentorship program. They partnered with local schools, inviting young people from different backgrounds to join them, to learn not only about customer service, but about building character, fostering empathy, and understanding the importance of integrity in any job. Each week, the team took turns mentoring the new recruits, sharing stories, teaching skills, and guiding them through the challenges of entering the workforce with confidence and kindness. The program quickly became a beloved part of the community, drawing praise from parents, educators, and local leaders who saw the profound impact it had on the young participants. The mentees, many of whom came from underprivileged backgrounds, found a safe and welcoming place in the store, a place where they could be themselves and feel valued for who they were. And for Mr. Ellis and his team, the program became a daily reminder of their mission, a chance to pass on the values that had become the foundation of their lives and their work. Through every interaction, every lesson, and every moment of encouragement, they knew they were building a legacy of respect and kindness that would live on in these young people long after they had left the store. In those quiet, fulfilling moments, Mr. Ellis realized that he had achieved something far beyond his original vision. He had created a legacy of goodness that would continue to grow, touching lives and inspiring others to carry forward the same principles that had transformed his life and the lives of everyone around him. As the mentorship program flourished, its impact extended well beyond what anyone had initially imagined. The young people who joined the program came from all walks of life, bringing with them different experiences, challenges, and aspirations. Some had never known what it was like to be treated with respect, let alone to feel capable and empowered in a work environment. Mr. Ellis and his team became not only mentors, but role models, offering these young adults a glimpse of what they could achieve when given the right support, encouragement, and guidance. One mentee, a shy girl named Maya, came from a background that had taught her to keep her head down and expect little from life. She barely spoke when she first joined, often shrinking in the presence of customers and avoiding eye contact with other staff members. But under the gentle mentorship of Sarah, who had taken a special interest in her, Maya slowly began to come out of her shell. Sarah spent extra time with her, showing her the basics of customer interaction, demonstrating how to listen to people and make them feel comfortable. She shared her own story with Maya, explaining how she, too, had once been quiet and unsure, afraid to stand out. Maya's eyes lit up as she listened, and with each passing day she grew a little more confident. She began greeting customers, smiling, and eventually even engaging in small conversations. It was a transformation that amazed the entire team, and, most importantly, Maya herself. She had discovered a strength within that she hadn't known existed, a strength that Sarah and the mentorship program had helped her uncover. Seeing these transformations filled Mr. Ellis with a profound sense of accomplishment. For him, the success of the program wasn't measured in numbers, but in moments like these, in the quiet confidence of a young girl who had learned to believe in herself, and in the growing self-worth of every mentee who walked through the doors. He saw that the program was shaping lives, creating opportunities not just for employment, but for personal growth, resilience, and a sense of self that would carry these young people through all the challenges ahead. But as the program grew, so did the interest from the broader business community. Other store owners, corporate leaders, and even nonprofit organizations began reaching out, intrigued by the way Mr. Ellis had combined mentorship with his store's daily operations. They wanted to know how they, too, could bring such a program to life. Invitations flooded in, asking Mr. Ellis to speak at conferences, participate in panels, and consult with other businesses that wanted to replicate his success. One afternoon, he received a visit from Evelyn Carter, the regional director who had first offered him the advisory role. This time, she arrived with a proposal that went beyond anything he had anticipated. "Mr. Ellis," she began after settling into his office, "I know how much this store and this community mean to you, and I want you to know that we recognize and appreciate all that you've accomplished here. But we're seeing something extraordinary, something that we believe can make an even greater impact if it's brought to a larger scale." She paused, gauging his reaction, then continued. "We want to turn this mentorship program into a national initiative, not just within our company, but as a partnership with educational and workforce development organizations across the country. We'd like you to lead this effort, to help us build a framework that other businesses can adopt. You'd have the resources, the staff, and the full support of our company to make this vision a reality." Mr. Ellis listened carefully, absorbing the weight of her words. He had always believed in the potential of his mentorship program, but he had never imagined it could grow to this scale. The idea of taking what they had built and expanding it to reach young people all across the nation was overwhelming and deeply inspiring. "This is an incredible opportunity," he said thoughtfully, glancing around his office, which felt like a second home to him. "But I need to consider what this would mean for the store, for my team here. They've been my foundation in all of this, and I don't want to lose what we've created together." Evelyn smiled, understanding his hesitation. "We don't want you to leave your store or your team. You would still be based here, overseeing everything as you've always done. But we would provide additional support. People who could help run the day-to-day operations while you focus on expanding the program. It would be your vision, Mr. Ellis, just on a larger scale." He took a deep breath, feeling both excitement and trepidation. The decision was not an easy one, but he knew that this opportunity aligned perfectly with the values he held dear, the values that had driven him to buy the store in the first place and to create a place where respect and integrity were paramount. He looked back at Evelyn, a quiet determination settling over him. "I'll do it," he said finally, his voice steady. "But I want my team to be involved. They're the heart of this program, and I want them to play an active role in bringing this vision to life." Evelyn nodded, clearly pleased. "Of course, this will be a team effort, and we'll make sure your team has every opportunity to contribute and grow along with you. Thank you, Mr. Ellis. You're about to make a difference on a scale that most people only dream of." With the decision made, Mr. Ellis gathered his team the next day to share the news. They listened in awe as he explained the scope of the new initiative, realizing that their work and their values were about to reach young people across the nation. Each of them felt a surge of pride, knowing that the lessons they had learned and embraced would now inspire countless others. In the days that followed, they began planning the expansion together, brainstorming ideas for training materials, workshops, and ways to make the mentorship program accessible and meaningful for a wider audience. Mr. Ellis encouraged each of them to bring their unique strengths to the table, knowing that their individual insights would shape the program into something truly transformative. The first phase of the national initiative launched with a pilot program in a handful of stores across the country. Mr. Ellis and his team traveled to each location, meeting the new mentors and sharing their experiences. They trained them not only in customer service, but in the deeper values of respect, empathy, and dignity that had transformed their own lives. The impact was immediate and profound. Young people in these new stores began to feel the same support and empowerment that had first blossomed in Mr. Ellis's store, and soon, word of the program spread even further. In time, the mentorship initiative became a recognized symbol of ethical business and workforce development, a shining example of how respect and kindness could be the driving forces behind success. And through it all, Mr. Ellis remained at the heart of the movement, a humble leader whose quiet vision had sparked a nationwide change. Standing in his store one evening, surrounded by his team and a new generation of mentees, Mr. Ellis reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He knew that what they had created was more than a program. It was a legacy of compassion and integrity that would continue to touch lives for years to come. And as he looked around, seeing the faces of those he had inspired, he felt a profound peace, knowing that together they had built something truly lasting. As the National Mentorship Program continued to expand, it became evident that Mr. Ellis's vision had sparked not only a business transformation, but a social movement. The program was featured in newspapers and business journals, and Mr. Ellis found himself speaking at conferences, sharing his philosophy with audiences far beyond his local community. His story resonated because it was simple yet powerful. Treating people with respect and investing in their growth could change lives, and by extension, change the world. His example offered a refreshing counterpoint to the profit-driven approach that had dominated business culture for so long. One memorable day, Mr. Ellis was invited to a large conference where leaders in business, education, and community development had gathered to discuss the future of workforce ethics. He spoke about the origins of his store, recounting how his initial experience of being dismissed and underestimated had inspired him to create a place where everyone was valued. He talked about his team, their growth, and the transformations he had witnessed within each of them. And he shared the story of Maya, the young mentee who had blossomed into a confident, capable young woman under the guidance of his team. By the end of his talk, the audience was visibly moved. People came up to him afterward, sharing their own stories of feeling unseen or underappreciated and expressing gratitude for his work. Mr. Ellis realized that the impact of his vision extended even further than he had imagined. His story was not just about a single store. It was a universal story about human dignity, about recognizing potential in others and nurturing it with care. After the conference, Evelyn Carter approached him with another unexpected proposal. She suggested that they publish a book together, a guide based on his mentorship principles, something that could reach even more people who might never have the chance to experience the program firsthand. Evelyn believed that a book could encapsulate Mr. Ellis's journey and the core values of the mentorship initiative, offering a blueprint for creating compassionate, ethical workplaces anywhere. At first, Mr. Ellis was hesitant. Writing a book seemed daunting, far outside his comfort zone. But the idea of documenting his experiences and insights in a way that could inspire others deeply appealed to him. With Evelyn's encouragement and his team's support, he agreed to the project, viewing it as another step in his mission to share the values that had transformed his life. In the months that followed, Mr. Ellis worked closely with Evelyn and a small team of writers. They spent countless hours interviewing him, capturing his philosophy, and crafting a narrative that would be accessible and relatable to readers of all backgrounds. Mr. Ellis wanted the book to feel like a conversation, a guide rooted in stories and experiences that readers could connect with on a personal level. As the book neared completion, he invited his team to contribute their own stories. Each member, Peter, Laura, Sarah, and even Maya, shared their experiences, adding their voices to the narrative. The result was a collection of stories and lessons that illustrated the journey they had all taken together, each person's growth a testament to the power of respect, patience, and kindness in action. The book, titled A Legacy of Respect, was released with modest expectations. But to everyone's surprise, it became an instant success. Readers across the country, from business leaders to educators, from young professionals to experienced managers, embraced the book's message. It resonated deeply in a world where many people had felt overlooked, underappreciated, and disconnected. Mr. Ellis's humble wisdom, his real-life examples, and his genuine belief in the potential of others made the book a phenomenon. As the book climbed bestseller lists and was featured in countless interviews and articles, Mr. Ellis found himself with a platform that reached far beyond his initial vision. He was invited to speak at national and even international events, to consult with major companies eager to reshape their cultures, and to provide guidance to nonprofit organizations focused on workforce development. Despite the newfound fame, Mr. Ellis remained grounded, always returning to his store between speaking engagements and consultations. He knew that his store, and the team that had stood by him from the beginning, was the heart of everything he did. He frequently gathered his team to update them on the program's progress, always involving them in his decisions and seeking their input on new ideas. One day, during one of these gatherings, Mr. Ellis looked around at the familiar faces of his team, feeling a swell of pride and gratitude. "This book, this program, all of it, it's not just mine," he said, his voice filled with warmth. "Each of you played a part in this. The way you've embodied these values, the way you've grown and shared yourselves, it's all part of the legacy we're building together. None of this would be possible without each of you." Peter smiled, nodding in agreement. "Mr. Ellis, I think I speak for all of us when I say that working here, learning from you, it's changed our lives. And seeing that change touch others, that's something I don't think any of us could have imagined." Laura added, "You've taught us that success isn't just about numbers or achievements. It's about people. It's about leaving things better than we found them, and I think we're all just so grateful to be part of this." Sarah, always thoughtful, simply said, "This place, this work, it's become part of who we are. and I think it will be with us no matter where we go or what we do." Mr. Ellis's eyes shone with pride and gratitude. He knew that his team had not only embraced his vision, but had made it their own, carrying forward a legacy that would live on through them. In that moment, he realized that his work was no longer just a job or even a mission. It was a life's purpose, a gift he could pass on to others, a reminder that true success lies in the respect and kindness we give to others. With that, Mr. Ellis and his team continued their work, knowing that their journey was far from over. The book, the mentorship program, and the store were only the beginning. Together, they would keep building a legacy of respect that would ripple outward, touching lives and inspiring change in ways they had only begun to imagine. And through it all, Mr. Ellis knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be, surrounded by people who believed in the power of kindness, working each day to create a world where everyone felt seen, valued, and respected.